Hi there, my front-end friends. One of the best ways to learn and to improve as a developer is to steal from others. And I don't mean just going and copying and pasting their code. That's not going to do much to make you a better developer, and it probably won't even work that well. What I mean, though, is finding other things people have done and recreating it on your own. But because you're finding what they've already done, you have the handy bit of when you get stuck or when you run into trouble or you can't get that one cool thing to actually work, you can refer back to how they did it. I recently came across this code pen with these fun little cards with a hover animation on it. I thought they looked pretty cool, the way the background moves a little bit as everything moves in, and just the timing, the animations, a lot of little subtle things here that I figured I could learn a lot from in trying to recreate it. And so I want to share with you the steps I would do to try and recreate something like this. And if I got stuck, how I would go ahead and try and figure out how they did things, especially because in CodePen, sometimes what you find is either using Sass or CSS. It might be using Pug in the HTML side of things. And so in CodePen, you can actually compile the code and get things that you might be more familiar with as well. So to get started with this, I just have their CodePen down here at the bottom. And as I said, this one is with Pug and using Sass as well. So we're going to see a little bit when I get stuck, which I invariably will, how I can go about and do this. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about making 4 cards. So I'm just going to come right here with one single card right in the middle that will plug in my page. And then if I wanted to, I could worry about creating more of them and sort of creating like the way he makes it responsive and everything. But for now, I think we can get enough value off just creating one single card. So I want it to be dead in the middle of my page. We'll come over here in my CSS and we'll select my body. And then I'm just going to throw this in here, which just means that it will be perfectly centered on the page. So if I come here and let's just put the letter A for now, and it shows up there. Perfect. So we're ready to get started. And when I'm trying to steal something, I don't want to be like copying and pasting from their code at all. And I want to try and figure out how I would do things at first, as much as possible. So when I'm looking at this, I see the background image, it's moving a little bit. To me, I probably want to use a background image for that. That's okay. Then I have the text that's coming. There's a little bit of separate movement between them, and we can maybe break that animation down with our DevTools a little more later on when we try and get it to look a little nicer. But I think the easiest thing to do, just because I want all of that to, I think, move together, I am going to do a card content. I'm not 100% sure if I actually need that, but my background would be on that. I can put some padding there just to create the space around that I need, and then have the content in the middle, I think would be the easiest thing to do. Then I have a title, I have a paragraph, and I have this button at the bottom. Now I've decided not to do mountains. I'm going to do mine with some food. So I'm going to have pasta. I just brought in some lorem ipsum text, and then I have a button that I did right here. So nothing too fancy that I'm bringing in, just really fast. If you are in either CodePen or VS Code or another editor where you have Emmet installed, it is part of VS Code by default, is I can just come here, I can just write lorem and hit tab actually without anything else, and it will give me lorem ipsum. Or I can say that I have like lorem 10 and it will give me 10 words of lorem ipsum. And so I could do it really fast where I need, paragraph times 3 each, or times 4, and each one of those needs 5 words of lorem. So do lorem 5, and then there we go. I have what I need. So just if you're recreating stuff, if you don't want to copy and paste or whatever it is, could be a bit faster to work. So with that in place, I think I can come over to my CSS now, and I'm going to choose my dot card, and I'm just going to give it a max width because I need one on there. It's less, here is grid is probably defining it. Maybe I could set it up for my grid just to specifically do it, but I'm just going to come here. This isn't really a big part of what I need to recreate, so I'm just going to put something on there. And let's also just say that we have, let's add a background color for now so I can see it. We'll go with an aqua because it looks okay. And then we want to add a bit of padding on there. We'll just say 1 rem for now. I'm just trying to set the stage, not stress about things too much. Just because of the way padding works and collapsing margins, all the other crap that comes with all of this. This is where I'm not worried about like big picture. I'm trying to recreate this one thing. So like I could just come here and say star margin of 0 just to get rid of them all. Maybe this isn't something you normally do on a project, but I'm not worried about bringing this into the bigger project. I'm just trying to recreate this one card, and this CSS is basically just for this and nothing else. So, don't worry about taking shortcuts on things that maybe you wouldn't want to do. A lot of people do this. If it's part of your normal thing, that's fine. But if you're someone who shies away from that, but you just want to get a bit more consistency with your spacing and stuff, like take some shortcuts along the way just to make it easier so you can focus on the bits that you need. Now there does seem to be a height on here as well, but I do know the heights can clearly change. I think that's through a media query that's happening though. And also, I'm not sure if the height actually might be getting set by what we have here, because it looks like it's pretty evenly, like the padding overall. So maybe I don't have to worry about the height. Maybe I'm just going to switch the units here, make it a little narrower. So I want to space these things out a little bit more. So let's come on my card content. And you'll notice I didn't use BEM here either. Again, I'm not worried about that. You know, some people always ask me, how come I'm not using BEM this time or whatever? Just, you know, I'm trying to create something quickly. I'm not worried as much about naming conventions. I'm more worried about just like learning on the CSS side of things. If naming conventions or whatever is something that you're still focused on, of course, stick with what your, you know, your main thing is. There's no harm in that whatsoever. But I'm not worried about naming conflicts or anything like that. So the card content in this case is like this bit that's right here inside the card. So for that, I can say that it's going to be a display of grid and a gap of 1 rem. And I've actually done a video that talks about how we don't necessarily always want to do this, where we do margin of 0 and bring that in, because usually spacing is relative to, it's not consistent. The headings have more space above them than below them, and things like that. But that's with flow content. So if you have an article where you have like multiple headings and all the stuff like that going on, and you do not have consistent spacing, you don't want to do this. But if you have something like this where there's 2 elements that are spaced out, that's it, and it's the same space on the top and bottom, then this is perfect and it works really well. Another thing on here, I'm going to go back up to my card, not on the card content, though it doesn't make a big difference, is my text align of center. It's just the way I tend to work, where I always try and put text alignment on the parent, just because everything inside. But again, that's just me being me. So that's getting a little bit better, though. You know what? The padding on the left and the right does look, now, like this is where I start trying to steal, and I go, you know what, part of it's the text, but I think there's more space on the left and the right. So if I have padding top and bottom, then maybe we even go up to a 2 on the sides. And then, of course, I just realized we probably want to come on here and say that my box sizing is border box. And the reason I thought of that is when I added the padding, I saw it got wider. And so I'm like, oh, it's not quite what I'm after. So I'm just going to sort of play with, maybe 25 is okay. I'm just trying to get it to be taller. Theirs is a pretty narrow. Maybe this is a 2.5. We'll stick with something like that. That's looking okay. And maybe a 1.5 at the top, actually. It's looking a little bit more like what I want it to actually look like. It's not quite as tall as theirs, but you know what? Their font size here on the paragraph does look a little bit bigger. Plus they have more line height. So this is where I start looking for like why is theirs taller than mine? And I think that's a few of the things. So let's come through and make a few modifications here. So we're going to say that on my body, we will say that there's a font family. I'm not going to worry too much, not font size, font family. I'm just going to say system UI, which is my go-to for sans serif. And then, of course, I need a serif that's italic, but only there. I didn't put any specific classes here. I just have the paragraph. I could just choose my P. I'm just going to say that it's my card P. It could be card content P, whatever we want. We'll do that. Content P. Font style is italic. The font family also is different. So font family is going to be my sans, or not sans. I always do that. It's my serif. There we go. So now I can see a big difference. I'm also going to increase the font size. Font size is going to be a 1.125 maybe. And then the line height will be like a 1.6 maybe. See now how much taller it got just by making those changes to it? Making that font size change. I'm not even sure if we need that, to be honest. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. I sort of like that it gave me a more tall style. So I'm going to stick with that. Very quickly, I'm going to cut ahead to style the button because it's not going to be too entertaining. Awesome. So there's my button. It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. So I'm pretty happy with that. I could probably play with my padding a little bit here. We'll do that really fast to increase 0.625 maybe on the bottom, just so it balances out a little bit. Some fonts do that where you get sort of inconsistent spacing on the top and the bottom because of the way the font spacing is. So there we go. That sort of gives me my base, and now I need to figure out the animation and the background image. Now for the image itself, I found this one on, so let's just come on my card content. And this is where, because there's 4 cards here, you would have to decide how you'd want to do it to have a different image on each one. So they probably need a modifier class or something, or just nth child, something to be able to change it if you're using a background image. Of course, the other choice is to include it directly in here. And I haven't looked and haven't had to steal anything. I'm just trying to copy. And it does make me wonder a little bit at this stage, like, did they include it as an actual image, Or did they do it in a way, to me, that's easier than having to make a modifier class, which is kind of annoying. So I don't know how he did this. So let's just go take a look. And it is using Pug. And I have a lot of trouble reading Pug, but I can see here card content, title, H2. He has the paragraph. He has a button. I don't see an image coming in here, but we can come to this little drop down icon right there. And we can say view compiled HTML. So we can actually take a look at exactly how he did it. And there's, no, he's definitely bringing the images in the CSS. And this is SCSS. So you can do the same thing, view compiled SCSS. And then you can come and take a look at it. The one thing is, if you're in this, you can't like edit it. You can just look at it and it's a little faded out. So let's just see what he did. I see some before and afters coming into it. It's probably for that dark. See how it gets darker when we hover? And he just used nth child. So I want to copy what he did. So I'm going to do it the same way with the background image. But if I was actually doing this, I would strongly think about actually including the image in the actual card, because it's easier than having to do a modifier class, I think. But it's sort of a decision you'd have to make along the way. And let's just do, or we'll make that a bit bigger. There we go, just so I can move that back over. We're going to sort of steal how he did it. So on my card, we'll just add this background image. I already have one from Unsplash. So background image, URL, and I can bring that one in. And there we go. It's not perfect, so let's just place it a little better. And actually, I was about to do a background size cover, but I just thought like we need this to move up. And if I use a cover, that's not going to work. And this could be a good time to look at how he did that. So let's go and dive in. So we have the background images set there. He must be doing, that's a transition. I'm just going to do a Control F to find, and we're going to look at background position. Is 0, 0. So Control F again. We're in CodePen, but if you do a Control F and hit return, it's going to find it, do it again. And that's the only time it's showing up. Or maybe he used... There must be a different background position on here somewhere. Oh, I just realized he's putting the image on the pseudo element. And then I think he's moving the pseudo element. Huh, that's interesting. And so I could definitely try to do that same thing, but just because I don't think we need to do it like that. I want to try something. Again, this is where you can learn. And if my solution here doesn't work, then I would definitely try and do more like what he did. But I want to try my own idea. And I think that's also somewhere you can go like, okay, they did that. You could even try what they did. But I do think it's worth, if you have an idea, on trying your own. So let's just see if this would work. Background size of, I'm going to say like 110%. And I want to do it on both. So 110% means it's a little bit bigger. And I'm going to do a background position of center bottom. And then what I want to try and do is say, if I do a card hover, and I also want this, I'm going to do a card, I can't focus on my card, but I can do a focus within, meaning if it's on the link itself, this would work. So if I focus, here, I'm going to do padding of like 5 rem just to show that it works. So if I hover, the padding changes up and down only. Oh, because of my width. But if I tab in, it's also doing it because I'm getting focus on that. So because there's focus inside my card, the padding is changing. But of course, now what I want to do is my background position is going to change to center top instead. Actually, his did the other way around. We're going to start at the top and we're going to slide it to the bottom. We'll do a transition of background position, 200 milliseconds. It works. There we go. Awesome. I think his moves less, so maybe like a 105 or something. The other thing you learn when you're trying to do things like this, I probably want a different easing function on there, maybe change the time of this a little bit. But you start learning like, oh, if I do too big of a number here, it looks bad. So I'm trying to like recreate his as much as possible, and that's actually looking a lot nicer, I think. So a little bit longer of an animation time with less movement, I find gives me a better result. Definitely I could play with the timing functions on that as well. But right away, I'm kind of happy with that. The other thing I will do is put a color of white on here because he had the white color. And now I need to figure out what to do. Actually, we'll do the color in a second because we're not going to, if I do that now, it's going to muck things up for my demo. Because we need to do this where everything moves down. So that would be on the card content. And this is definitely where if you have no idea how he did that, well, you take a look at how he did that, right? So I have an idea, and let's see if I want to use a transition on the content. I want to move my content all down and then move it in when I hover, or when I have a focus within. So I'm guessing he did that. And I know he called it content as well. So page content, that's the whole page. So here I see on the content itself, there's the transition of a transform. So that's good. And he's actually using custom properties for both, I'm guessing it's duration and I don't know what the E would be. We'll have to go look at the custom properties after. And then, oh, and so he's including this only in hover, which is good. So if we had a device, we'll come back to this because we could definitely add this in after. The translate 0 content, there we go. So he's moving it down, and then when we hover, it's moving the translating back up, basically. Cool. So yeah, that was sort of my idea. Now what I like here is this calc that we can see. Let's move this back down. But that calc right there is actually kind of useful because I wasn't sure how to know how much to move it down by for this. Because when I look at it, I want to make sure the title is always actually there. So that gives me a bit of an idea. So card content, let's just come here and we'll do it translate, transform on the Y of, he did a calc of 100%. Let's just do 100% and see what happens. Oh, transform. I do this a lot, where I mix those two up. Translate Y. So see how the pasta's too far down? So he did a minus, I think it was a 4.5 rem, and that number might not work for me. It's probably a bit too much. So there's probably a way that you could calculate exactly what you want based on your padding and some other things along the way, but I'm just going to line it up. But I sort of like that idea of going, let's move it all the way down and then just shove it up a little bit instead of playing around with a percentage, even though that would probably work fine. And then we want to say when we hover, so my card content hover, or we could do card content focus within, and we just take this and move it to a 0. So it goes back into the original position. Card content. Oh, we want my card. See how that's mucked up. We want to say the card hover gets a card content, right? So when we hover on the card content will change. And same thing here. And then dot card content here. So now when we hover on top, it moves up, but of course we want that to transition. So let's just come here and say that we're going to transition that and say that it's, that's my transform, and we'll say that I think we did 350 ms before, so we'll try the same thing. And now we can see that it's sliding off and on. Awesome. But we also want to go on my card itself all the way back up here. And the last thing we need is, I guess we'll just throw it down at the bottom, and overflow of hidden. And we start getting it. Now I like his much more. So now is when I need to figure out why I like his better. And part of the learning when you're stealing, again, is trying to figure out how you would do it. So looking at it, analyzing it, figuring out why does his look better than mine. Part of it is I think he has a nicer, I think it's a longer animation actually. So let's just, I think by making it a bit longer, there's probably a better timing curve on there. The timing function I think is a little nicer. And I'm also noticing the text here is actually at an opacity of 0, and then the opacity is coming in. So, okay, that's great. Now I have to figure out how I would want to do that. So that would just be on my paragraph. I would have to come in and say that that has an opacity of 0. And then I need that to fade in. So, and this is where using Sass and nesting, even we have nesting is coming to the regular one, but I guess we'll just copy this. So card content hover. And just because of how I've been doing it, we're also going to need to have the same rule here. So let's duplicate this line, and this would be my focus within. And then we would, on that, do an opacity of 1. Of course, we need that to transition. Transition. I was doing 550 milliseconds, I think, on my opacity. And now, card content hover. Oh, because we're doing it on the card itself, and that means I don't want my direct selector. There we go. Now the problem is I almost feel, I guess we can go back to having white, which will help us a little bit here, even though we still probably won't see it. So for my, actually for now, let's turn that off and just make this black, or we'll do like a 33, just so we can see. So see how it still doesn't look as nice as his? So let's do a fun thing here. And DevTools are also, we have this, but what I'm going to do, instead of trying to break his code apart here, is with my DevTools open, I'm going to do a Control-Shift-P. If you're on a Mac, Command-Shift-P, and write animation. And you're going to get this that comes up, which is show animations. And I want that on. And now we're going to hover, and it doesn't matter which card I hover on. It's going to show you the animations. Oh, they're actually different depending on the direction it goes in. And I can just see that from based on what I'm seeing here. So I'm actually going to click on this first one. And you can see it actually showed the animation. But what's cool here is now you can break down what he did. And I can even grab this thing. If I can manage to, let's make this bigger. So gonna let me, there we go. And I can actually, you can see, whoops, we went through it there, but I can drag this along and it's gonna show me what's happening in my animation there. So I can break the animation down and I can see that the paragraph, there's a delay on the paragraph moving compared to when the rest of the content is moving. So that means the paragraph is actually shifted down a little extra too. And then, so that's why you're getting this, like, it's sliding up, but then the paragraph's also sort of moving into that space, which is really neat. And I think that's what makes that animation really nice. That means there's a little delay on the opacity. I can see the transform has, like, the main transform has basically stopped. And you can actually, we can see the curves on these. Oh, and he has, that background is also still getting darker sort of as this is going on all the way out to probably here, which is interesting too. The button is also in, the button looks like it's following the same animation as the paragraph. And you can see that he is, I think, just based on these curves, I think he probably came in with something a bit more custom. So that's really cool. And so let's bring that down. And I love that little animation. Definitely a nice way to like get animations without trying to like break things down too much. You just go, okay, the reason that's looking nicer is I need the paragraphs and the button. So let's make one for everything here. So I'm going to do card content. We're going to select everything in there that's not the H2, or not my card title, I guess, dot card title. And we're going to add a transform on that because we want it to be a little bit lower, right? So transform, translate Y. And I don't need it a lot by the looks of it, but let's just try like a 50%. This is where I find instead of going directly to his code and being like, oh, he used 10%, I'm going to use 10%, by coming in here and trying your own numbers and seeing if it works, you'll learn a lot more because it probably won't work on that first guess. Maybe you're going to nail it, but it probably won't work on that first guess that you try. And then you compare to, okay, this is what I tried. I don't like it. Let me see if I can get closer, or let me just go and see what he did now. And that's where you learn a lot more. By just going and being like, oh, he used 10%, so I'm going to use 10%. That's like following a tutorial like you're watching right now, which are fine. You can learn a lot by following along with something. But when you're trying to do things on your own and then you're correcting your own mistakes, you learn so much from that. And that's why I think like stealing from someone else is amazing, because it gives you that like path to be able to learn. And to get to the final result, but you don't have it in front of you right from the beginning. You sort of have to find a way to get to it. And then you're like, okay, I'm really stuck. At least you have an answer, right? So let's, we'll do that transform, translate down. Also here, I'm going to put a delay. So maybe I think he had another custom property there that was the D, which would have been the delay. I'm going to do like 100 millisecond delay on that transition happening for the opacity. And then on that, we're also, let's duplicate this down. This is going to be my card. Hover, not card title, which we're going to have to get more specific, I guess, in this case. So I guess I could have selected them individually. Dot card, card content, just because I don't want to, I don't want this to happen to the card content itself. So I want to make sure I'm selecting specifically the not card title. And then we can duplicate that line so it's my focus within. And make sure there's a comma there. And then this would just go up to a 0. And on this, I'm going to do a transition of, we're just going to steal the same one. You could, again, come in with custom properties, other things, but at the beginning, I'm not worried about that. I just want it to work. You can also then refactor things after if you get it looking the way you like it. So on the way down, it's terrible. See how it's hopping? What did I do wrong now? So this, oh, I have opacity here. So actually, yeah, this should be my transform. Okay, so it's sort of working. I'm just trying to think. I see when I go this way, it's definitely moving correctly. I think this is way too big. We're going to do that as a 20% instead. I think that's better, but I don't know why. Oh, the opacity is going to 0 as soon as I come off. Okay, so we'll have that. I probably could do this with a separate selector, but we're just going to say that it's my opacity here because it'll cover the base for all of them. Opacity, and actually I think his opacity actually was on both of them. So, but anyway, we'll do opacity 550 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds here as well. So it's the same for both of them. I'm getting a weird thing on my transform, transition opacity, and transform. And that took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out what I did wrong. I forgot to comma separate these two. So Prettier is going to put them on one line when I save this, but just if you have multiple transitions, comma separate them. And there we go. So right away, that looks so much better to me. I think my button, because I'm using percentages here, the button is moving less down than the paragraph is. Which is kind of weird. So they're sort of overlapping a little bit. So I think instead of a percentage here, it actually makes sense just to say like 2rem or something and move it by a fixed amount. So then they move up together. So awesome. I've got a lot of the things I wanted to discover from this. There's still like getting that background to slide in. I'm going to use a pseudo element for that. And just for me, learning a lot from this is just on these animation timings and offsetting them a little bit, and the different things we can do with that for me is really interesting. And being able to steal this, you learn so much from it. And then when you're doing your own project, you have these ideas of like, oh, I know I can make this look a little bit fancier by implementing these types of little delays and sliding things in differently. And then, oh, I go and look at his, and like we saw when we were looking at his code, another interesting thing was the use of he had that media query for the hover, and maybe you've never seen that before, so that gives you another thing to look into and learn from. And so as much as I think stealing from people can be really, really helpful, I think another thing that's really, really helpful too is being able to ask questions. So if you are stuck sometimes and you know, for me, like my comma, forgetting the comma here and not knowing why it wasn't working, if you just can't figure that out, having somewhere to ask a question can be really useful. So I do have a Discord community that's all about front-end developers helping each other out. There are some back-end people in there as well if you're a full-stack developer and you're looking for help, or you just want to chat with other developers or whatever it is. So I've linked that just down below if you'd like to join and hang out with us and have a good time. But coming back to this idea of stealing, I really do encourage it. I think you can learn a lot from it. And I'm actually going to stop here and encourage you to continue working on this if you think it looks like a fun project and you want to do a little bit more with it. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about this hover thing, I have actually covered that in another card that I did that had sort of a fancy hover animation on it as well, where there was a lot of moving pieces. And if you'd like to see that, it is right here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, I would like to thank my enablers of awesome, who are Johnny, Tim, Simon, Michael, James, and Andrew, as well as all my other supporters over on Patreon. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.